Hey everyone, welcome to class. Get settled in. Today we're doing something a little different. We're tearing down that beautiful, pristine scenery you see in nature documentaries. Instead, we're going to uncover the cold, hard, strategic mathematics that actually drive animal behavior. We're looking at survival and reproduction, not as these random, beautiful acts of nature, but as a viciously logical, highly competitive masterclass. So let's get right into it. First up, I really want you to consider this question. Do animals actually behave for the good of the species? I mean, for decades, right, those classic wildlife documentaries with the booming baritone narrators have been feeding us this line. They paint a picture of nature as this fundamentally benign, harmonious place where everyone pitches in for the greater good.
Well, okay, let's dive into this, because we absolutely need to shatter that peaceful illusion. The hallmark card view of a cooperative, self-sacrificing animal kingdom, it simply isn't how evolution works, at all. The Darwinian reality is built on individual selection. It's a world of intense genetic competition and ruthless survival strategies. The ultimate goal isn't holding hands with the rest of your species, it's passing on your own genes, full stop.
So, here's our syllabus for today's explainer. We'll start with the logic of infanticide, then look at the intersexual arms race, move on to manipulating sex ratios, and finally, kinship and organized warfare. All right, Section 1, the logic of infanticide. Let's look at survival at literally all costs. This first case study is going to completely dismantle that comforting idea that babies are universally protected in the animal kingdom. Let's look at a brutally clear, incredibly common evolutionary strategy that we see in langur monkeys, lions, and mountain gorillas. Imagine a male fights his way to the very top and takes over a troop. But, his time as the alpha is going to be brief, maybe just a year or two. The problem is, the females are currently nursing infants, which means they won't ovulate for another couple of years. For this new male, that's a mathematical disaster. His evolutionary solution, he kills the infants. It's dark, but it immediately stops the females from nursing, triggering them to ovulate again, and allowing him to pass on his genes before his short tenure is up. It's horrifying, right? But mathematically speaking, is completely sound. Now put yourself in this situation. Imagine you are a pregnant primate whose troop was literally just taken over by a murderous new alpha. What do? You don't just give up. Females have evolved their own absolutely brilliant physiological countermeasures to protect their massive genetic investments. Enter one of the absolute greatest biological tricks in the entire animal kingdom, pseudoestrus. The pregnant female somehow manages to generate all the external physical signs of being in heat, even though she's already pregnant. And the new male, who, let's be honest, isn't exactly carrying around a gynecology textbook, he falls for this trick every single time. He mates with her. A few weeks later, boom, she gives birth. The male just assumes this incredibly fast gestation is a testament to his own amazing prowess, and he leaves the infant entirely alone. It's genius. Moving on to Section 2, the intersexual arms race.
Now you might assume that once a male and female actually agree to mate, they're basically on the same team, right? But biologically speaking, their evolutionary goals are rarely perfectly aligned. We really like to think of reproduction as this ultimate cooperative effort, but beneath the surface of all that Valentine's Day romance lies a literal biological battleground, and it is playing out right inside the womb. Now, what's really interesting about this is how it completely violates everything you learned about standard Mendelian genetics back in high school. Usually, it doesn't matter which parent a gene comes from. A gene is a gene, but imprinted genes function entirely differently depending on whether you inherited them from your mother or your father.
Let's look at this coevolutionary arms race, because it's fascinating. Think about tournament species, where a male mates and just leaves. He wants that specific offspring to extract as many calories as possible to grow huge and survive. So his genes push for maximizing fetal growth and driving deep uterine invasion. The mother, however, she has to survive this pregnancy so she can reproduce again in the future. So her counter genes actively work to slow down that growth and blunt the effects of the father's genes. It is a literal tug of war on a cellular level, using things like insulin-like growth factors pushed by the dad, battling against the blunted receptors built by the mom.
Usually, this system stays in a really tense, careful balance. But when that genetic balance breaks, when one side's gene is mutated and knocked out of action, the results are catastrophic. The extreme, quote-unquote, selfish strategy of the other parent's gene just runs wildly out of control. So if the father's gene is missing, the mother's defense is too strong, and the fertilized egg just fails to implant. But if the mother's gene is missing, the father's invasive growth gene goes unchecked. That results in terrifying, rapidly growing uterine cancers like choriocarcinoma. It's a high-stakes standoff.
Let's jump into Section 3, Manipulating the Sex Ratio.
Okay, let's explore how mothers actually employ a subconscious metabolic strategy to determine whether they should give birth to sons or daughters based on their environment. The brilliant biologist Robert Trivers proposed this fascinating theory. In highly competitive tournament species, having a son is a high-risk, high-reward gamble. Think about it. Maybe 5% of the males account for 95% of the matings. If your son becomes the alpha, you've hit the genetic jackpot. But if he doesn't, he might never reproduce at all. Having a daughter, on the other hand, is a very conservative, low-risk genetic strategy. Almost all females will have at least a baseline number of offspring. So, high-ranking, super-healthy mothers can afford the metabolic gamble of having a son, while lower-ranking mothers are much safer betting on daughters.
But it's not just about social rank, guys. It's about the literal biological cost of the pregnancy. Male fetuses are metabolically far more expensive to bring to term. So during times of famine or severe ecological scarcity, a mother's body will essentially read the evolutionary biology textbook. Subconsciously, she will spontaneously abort more male fetuses to focus her limited, precious calories on the cheaper, safer bet, daughters.
And this is perfectly illustrated by our own biology. At the exact moment of fertilization in humans, roughly 53% of embryos are male. Why the skew? Well, precisely because those male embryos are metabolically far more expensive and vulnerable. So by the time birth actually rolls around, 9 months later, that ratio has naturally dropped down to roughly 50-50.
Finally, Section 4, Kinship and Organized Warfare.
We are scaling all the way up now, from cellular warfare in the womb to actual organized physical warfare. And it's driven entirely by social structure. In social mammals, there's a rule. One gender always leaves the group at puberty and moves away to find a new troop. This pattern is called exogamy. Now, its basic function is pretty simple. It prevents inbreeding. But the specific gender that packs up and leaves, that actually dictates the violence level of the entire species.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly why that happens. In baboons, the males leave home at puberty. This means a given baboon troop is totally full of adult males who are completely unrelated to each other. As a result, they fight constantly amongst themselves. It's chaotic. But in chimpanzees, the females leave at puberty. That means all the adult males in a chimp group have grown up together. They're brothers, they're cousins. They don't fight much internally. Instead, they cooperate.
But as you'll see, that cooperation turns out to be a truly terrifying reality for anyone living next door. Because these related male chimpanzees get along so well, they band together to form literal border patrols. They systematically hunt, attack, and eradicate neighboring groups. Simply because the males next door share genetic kinship, chimpanzees have effectively invented a biological version of genocide. It's incredibly dark, but it's all driven by that evolutionary math.
To summarize today's explainer, I want to leave you with this quote from André Lavoie. Evolution is not an inventor. Evolution is a tinkerer. Because really, all of these behaviors we've talked about today, from that deceptive pseudoestrus trick to the tragic organized warfare of chimps, they aren't perfectly engineered, pristine designs. No, they're messy biological workarounds, or what evolutionary biologists like to call spandrels, unavoidable byproducts of other traits being selected for. Evolution just uses whatever duct tape it has lying around to ensure survival.
Which brings us to a final, pretty uncomfortable question. As humans, we have a messy mix of all these traits hiding right there in our biology. So, if our own behaviors are built on this exact same tinkered, highly competitive genetic rulebook, how much of our social world is truly our own choice? And how much is just nature's ruthless evolutionary arms race quietly playing out in the background? Think about that for next time. Class dismissed.